DJ Valentino here with WSOU. Now, throughout my time at WSOU, I have had the privilege of interviewing bands from A Day to Remember to Papa Roach to Trivium. But those that know me know that this is a very, very special interview because I'm joined today with the lead vocalist of my personal favorite band of all time, Ice Nine Kills. Spencer Charnas, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, man. Thank you for the kind words. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I mean, you guys have just been one of the few bands that have really never stopped. You know, you're always going full throttle, and it shows. It really definitely shows. So tell me about how you're handling quarantine and how right now, for a band that's so active all the time, is it tricky to kind of like not slow down a bit, but adapt, you know?
I think as someone that's been on the road for so many years, not getting so much downtime at home, the idea of having to spend a few extra months off the road, it isn't the worst thing. Of course, I love playing live. I love interacting with our fans. But I've tried to keep a pretty positive attitude about the whole thing. And I've sort of just looked at the whole situation as not horrible, but just really a flop in schedules, because the time that we were supposed to be out on the road this spring, I've just decided, hey, I'm going to do a lot of writing and hopefully get the album finished earlier than I would have got it finished if we had been on the road. So I think that all things considered, I've been doing pretty well.
So now, Ice Nine Kills is one of those bands that completely unexpected, you know what I mean? Like, you come out with Predator Becomes the Prey, which was such a left turn from Safe is Just a Shadow. And then you have that concept album, Every Trick in the Book, with all the theatrics and new noises. And then you go full horror with The Silver Scream and obviously the final cut. With this new music you're writing, is this going to be another complete, like, drastic turn? Or is this going to be more along the lines of what we heard in The Silver Scream?
I think it's a little too early to tell, and of course, like all good horror novels or horror films, I don't want to give too much away. I want that element of surprise to still be there. But I think that with the last couple albums, most importantly, I think we've found what really makes us Ice Nine Kills, and more than anything, when you have a band and when you have a business, and those two are together, I think finding something that you really enjoy is so important in the process. And I think that one of the reasons the last two albums struck a chord with people is because I was having so much fun making them. And I think it sort of shows in the final product. You can hear that this is fun. And I think that's a large part of why those albums were successful, because I think people felt that energy and it radiated off of them.
Yeah, and again, like, horror has always been a huge part of kind of your personality and what you love. You know, you've had Cleaver clothing way before horror was really kind of introduced into Ice Nine Kills. And now it's kind of come to a point where the two have like met in a perfect circle, where I could see Cleaver clothing merch being Ice Nine Kills merch and kind of vice versa. And I think that that's so cool that you're right. You know, you've always followed your passion, and once you really have the most fun doing what you're doing, it shows.
Absolutely. I think that horror has always been a part of what I do in every respect of my life. And I think that it's now really come to the surface and really permeated through the band. Whereas before, I think there were subtle references, whether it be song titles or certain pieces of merchandise or names of tours. But now to see it come full circle and be so clearly something that we wear on our sleeves in everything that we do is really exciting. And I'm just so ecstatic that people have responded to that how they have.
And what I love is that you guys, what you've done is you've almost weaved yourself so deeply into the horror culture that now, like, famous stuff like the Overlook Hotel, you have a legacy with there now with that EP that just came out, Undead and Unplugged. Anybody that listens to The Silver Scream, you've recorded some vocals at the Nightmare on Elm Street house, the Halloween house. So you have almost made the horror legacy a part of the Ice Nine Kills legacy, which is so fascinating.
Well, thank you for saying that. I think that I've always been so interested in stuff like film locations and the screen use props from movies, and just all of that sort of lore that surrounds horror films and horror culture. So any way that I could bring that into what we do, whether it's performing vocals at like you said, at that Michael Myers house or the Nightmare on Elm Street house, or being able to perform a concert, whether it's at the house that inspired the hotel that inspired The Shining, or the house that was in Scream. I mean, those things for me, I just approach from a fan's perspective, and that's the stuff that I want to do as a fan. And I think that the fact that it just works so well with our whole aesthetic and aura is just so cool, and such a fun way to sort of bring what we do to life.
So what was like the most surreal moment for you? You know what I mean? That moment where you're like, oh my God, like I'm in this, like the movies I've watched a million times. I'm actively a part of this now, you know?
I think back in the day when I was 12 or 13, being on the street where they filmed the original Halloween, that was like the first time I felt, oh my God, I'm inside that movie that really got me into the genre. So that always holds a special place in my heart. But I think the single most impactful moment in terms of being like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm here, is when we did an event at the house from the ending of Scream, Stu's house, from like that last bloodbath, so to speak, of that original film. And it was really just like stepping into my childhood. And a lot of film locations that I've been to, you're like, oh man, this is a lot bigger, or this is a lot smaller than I thought it would be, or oh, it's different than it used to be. But that particular house in Tamales, California, which is part of like Sonoma County, wine country in Northern California, that house was just like you see it in the movie, and being in there was like you were inside Scream. So that was one of the craziest moments ever for me.
And I know that you performed acoustic in the garage, you know, or the infamous garage. And I'm sure that the fans that got to see that must have also felt like, you know, not only am I seeing Ice Nine Kills, but I'm seeing them in this historic location.
Yeah, it was just an amazing weekend altogether. Every aspect of that time spent in that area was amazing. From all the filming locations that we did on the bus tour, to being able to sleep in one of the rooms, like, you know, that's famous for like the love scene between Skeet and Nev Campbell, and where Skeet gets fake killed. It was just amazing, and just little stuff like seeing the knife wound in one of the doors. It was really an amazing experience for a horror fan and for a Scream fan.
Definitely, definitely. Now, another thing that I wanted to ask you about was in your writing process, how many songs do you scrap, or do you try to work and make sure every song gets on the record? Because I know that Your Numbers Up was originally not like, well, you wrote it for the original album, but then you kind of threw it away, and then you went back to it for the Final Cut edition. Is that typical? Do you always try to make songs work for an album, or is it just more, no?
I think back in the day, I would say, really far back, like to the Burning EP and Last Chance to Make Amends, back to those days, I think pretty much every song that we wrote would end up on an album, because we didn't have as many songs, and it was more just about, hey, let's shoot a bunch of songs against a wall and see which ones work, see which ones people respond to. But as time went on, we did start to write more songs than would end up on the album. In particular with the Silver Scream, we had a couple ideas for songs that could be about Scream, but none of them felt right. So the song that you hear today has no elements of any of those other past ideas. I started completely from scratch, and I really loved how that one turned out, and it was so cool to be able to play with that character. And originally when we were recording it, I was trying to get Roger Jackson, the guy that, famously voice as Ghostface to be a part of it, to do some of the lines. But it turns out that because he doesn't own that character, he's just hired by a production company to do it, he couldn't do that voice. So in a way, it would have been amazing to have him in the song, but I really did like the challenge of trying to have to mimic his voice. And there are a couple of lines on there that I'm really proud of myself, and I really think sound like him. I think this, when I say wrong answer in particular, not to pat myself on the back, but I was like, man, that sounds like it was actually Roger Jackson. To me, maybe I'm in denial.
No, I definitely hear it. I definitely hear it. And, while we're on the topic of like your vocal style, I think it's so cool that you've always had a super distinguished and like recognizable theatric vocal like style, the way you sing. I've heard it on, The Fastest Way Through a Girl's Heart, and even before that on the Greatest Story Ever Told. And then it's just amped up on all throughout Every Trick in the Book and The Silver Scream, where when you sing, there's like almost like a manic energy to it that's just so infectious. How do you go about vocally, like adding personality to your singing?
Well, thank you very much. And, to be honest, I never really ever considered myself a great singer. It was just something that, because we needed a frontman at the time, and before I played guitar and did a little bit of the singing, and I just sort of stepped into that role. I never really had any singing lessons, and so I was always just trying to sort of mimic the sounds that I really loved, especially from like Broadway and stuff like that. But as far as throwing myself into the role of each song, I try to, especially with The Silver Scream, I try to think about, what would someone like Michael Myers, who doesn't speak at all, ever, in the franchise, except maybe like a little bit of grunting maybe in one of Rob Zombie's one. How would he sing? You can't really picture Michael Myers singing, and I love being able to try to create that, and those are the places where I think it's fun to play with, because we're not just regurgitating the story, but I feel like it's really fun to be able to try to, hey, let's go to that next level and try to add something that wasn't there before. Because I think if you're not doing that, you're just regurgitating the story, and I didn't want to just do that.
Yeah, definitely. And that's another thing that I've noticed, is that with Ice Nine Kills songs, yes, they have like the Silver Scream and Every Trick in the Book has its source material. But at the end of the day, even if you've never read those books or seen those movies, they're still great songs on their own, and you can separate the two if you wanted to. So.
Thank you.
So now, switching gears a bit, there's another question I definitely wanted to ask you, and this is something that I've been holding on to for about 5 years now, and I've been dying to ask you this question. When you first released Bloodbath and Beyond as a single, the bridge during the breakdown had like a Dracula monologue throughout the bridge, but on the album version, it's not there. How come that is?
Yes, it's a good question. What happened was, when we were putting that song together, it actually happened on a couple of tracks, maybe 3. I wanted to pull some lines specifically from either the book, be it the song about Anne Frank, The Diary of Anne Frank, or the song you're referring to with Dracula. And I wanted to use clips from some of those really, really old films that were, in the early 1900s, and put that within the song, because I always liked when bands did that growing up. I loved movie samples over musical passages. And when it came very close to the album's release, unfortunately, the label told us that they weren't able to secure the rights to some of those movies. And I think one of the things would have cost like, $20,000 to be able to sample, and it just didn't, for where we were in our career at that time, especially financially, it just didn't really make any sense. So it's cool to know that there are versions that have those samples still in them, and that happened with Hell in the Hallways in the original version. You had some of Carrie's mother's dialogue over the intro, and one of the funniest instances of that whole situation with samples, we did have passages of The Diary of Anne Frank read throughout The People in the Attic, which is about that book. And unfortunately, that was removed too. But we learned that if we had just had one additional month for the album's release, that book would have been in public record. I forget the exact.
Public domain, yeah.
Exactly, that's what it is, public domain. That book was just about to enter public domain, so we missed being able to use that just by a very short window, unfortunately.
Oh, and now, especially like, another question I've had, bridging the gap between Every Trick in the Book and The Silver Scream, you guys let fans vote on what song they wanted to incorporate, either one from Psycho or The Shining, which is what won, and Enjoy Your Slay kind of came to fruition. When that happened, how much of each song did you have written? Or did you just go in like, okay, whatever you guys want, I'll just start writing from there?
That's another good question, and I've seen that asked over the years, and I know a lot of people think that we had both songs written and then we just chose one, but we literally didn't start writing the song until we knew what it was about. I think that I had, because the way that we always write songs is I'll sit down with an acoustic guitar or piano and come up with some sort of melody. And I think I did have the initial melody for the verse of Enjoy Your Slay, but I didn't know what song it was going to be about. I just had this melody that I thought was cool. And as soon as the fans turned in the votes, that's when I went for it with basing on The Shining. So it really was written because that's what you guys wanted.
Now, when you went in to write The Silver Scream, did the thought cross your heads? Like, well, should I put the Psycho, like, should I start writing Psycho, or no? Should I just, like, let that be because the fans voted on this one?
Yeah, I think, in the back of my mind, I wanted to let that one in particular breathe. I think I did have a couple of ideas for a song or a chorus that would have worked for Psycho while we were doing The Silver Scream, but it just didn't come together the way we wanted it to. So, maybe eventually you'll get that song about Psycho, because obviously the influence of that movie cannot be overstated, and also just so many iconic scenes in that movie that I think could be turned into a great song. And then the Bernard Herrmann score in that movie is just incredible. So to be able to play with that and homage that in some way, I think would be really cool.
Definitely. I could like hear like almost like when I see the shower scene, I could hear like a bridge forming, like a perfect Einstein Kills style. I love it. I love it.
Me too. Yeah, absolutely.
So now another question that I had, kind of going back to when you mentioned, we were talking a little bit about Cleaver Clothing. Is it difficult to run Cleaver Clothing and be the frontman of a successful band? Because both companies have really, gone off. The band is doing incredibly well. Cleaver is doing amazing. Is it tricky to kind of find that balance when you're going about the life of a frontman?
It absolutely is, and it was more difficult, a couple years ago when I didn't have as many people on our team as I do with the band and with the clothing line. And I'm happy to say that, especially with the clothing line, I've got an infrastructure built that I don't need to necessarily handle the day-to-day operations of it, because I just unfortunately don't have enough time to do everything properly. So I'm more sort of the big picture idea guy in that regard. And I think I'm just lucky to have a good team on both sides of the fence to be able to run both businesses in a way where they deserve to be run.
Yeah, and especially now, is it like tricky to know if you have a merch idea design, like, oh, I think this would be really cool. Is it tricky to know if that would be better off as Einstein Kills or Cleaver? Or do you just kind of know going in?
I think, back in the day, there were some ideas of overlaps, but I think it's both, while both entities are clearly in the same world of darkness and horror and sort of subculture, I think they do have two distinct identities. So I think it's easy for me to see which stuff works well for which one.
Definitely. And now another thing that I am very, very excited to talk about and get your ideas on is Thanksgiving Fest has been going on for so long. And I mean, I've gone to 6 of them and I've seen it.
Oh, wow.
from like almost like a small Webster Underground hallway to I was at the most recent Massachusetts one, sold out in Worcester, where it's like a live, like I think you even said a live, you're going to be filming this one for something. How incredible is it to watch Thanksgiving Fest evolve to that extent?
It's been amazing, man. And like you said, just starting out from the humble beginnings of playing, the upstairs of the Middle East, which is, as you know, a venue in Cambridge, Massachusetts, that's like, I want to say 200 cap, maybe 150 cap, to go from that small venue to eventually go downstairs at the Middle East, which was, I think maybe 700 or 800 cap to sell that out. And then, 2 years later or a year later, be at the upstairs of the Palladium, which is, I think, I want to say 500 or 700, 800 cap, a venue I grew up going to. And then to go downstairs at the Palladium the next year and just have that be such a big jump in size to like, I think it was 3,000 person sold out show. It was really, honestly, it's trite and cliche. It's really kind of a dream come true to be able to do that. And man, that was such a memorable show, the last one. And just so cool to be on that stage in particular, which was actually the first stage the band ever played on in a battle of the bands back in 2001. So it was really cool.
So now you guys, again, filmed that show. Will we see that like live DVD anytime soon, or is that going to be coming out?
Yeah, we're working on some really cool stuff with that. I was just actually looking at some artwork that has to do with something that I can't give away just yet, but be assured you will be seeing and hearing that show very soon, and I'm very excited about it.
Awesome. I mean, we're looking forward to it. Now, just while we're on the topic of the live shows, how have you, again, like adapted? And I feel that every time I've seen you guys live, not only do you get like a more energetic, you guys have stronger stage presences, but it just becomes an event. Like it doesn't even become a show. It becomes like an experience. How have you upgraded your live shows to such a degree over the last 5 years?
I think a lot about the live show has to do with logistics and the sizes of the stages you were able to play on, and also when you're headlining versus being a support act. And when you're on smaller stages and when you're supporting a band, you have less time, you have less resources, usually less money to play with in terms of a larger scale lighting show. And I think that the last headliner that we did in the last fall, where we played at the Palladium, that was the first time where we were playing on those size stages and headlining. It was sort of the perfect storm of both of those worlds coming together to allow us to try some risky stuff and to put some of the budget into making these songs and these movies come to life in a live setting, and just super excited to see how well it worked. And so much of the credit goes to our crew that works tirelessly on everything from the lighting to setting up of the equipment and the props and our makeup. It's a real team effort that I can't take all the credit for that 100%.
Definitely. And I love how, again, like, especially with the Silver Scream album cycle, I noticed it where you guys started out playing just in costumes, and then you incorporated more props, and then like actors and actresses, you know what I mean? And it just got bigger and bigger and bigger. And it's truly a spectacle. I've said it on air multiple times, but anybody of our listeners, if you haven't seen Ice Nine Kills live yet, you really, really have to. It's incredible once things return to a sense of normalcy.
Thank you.
So now another question that I have, if you're okay, if I backtrack just a bit to, I believe, 2017, you guys actually re-recorded Safe is Just a Shadow in full in that time frame. And I really want to get your opinion on this, because the way that you sang and even like overall your playing styles have evolved so much since then. Was it tricky to kind of re-record that and reimagine that almost?
Yeah, it was. I think that one of the main reasons we wanted to do it was because, there's just so many advances in sound recording and technology since we had done that at that point almost 7 years prior. So being able to get back in there and add some vocal inflections and sort of give the album the treatment that it deserved in 2020 or 2017 rather, was a cool experience. But yes, it definitely was challenging, especially because I think that oftentimes the first time you record a song, even if the quality isn't necessarily incredible, there's something special about a first recording of a song where you get sort of a spontaneity that when you try to recreate it, you don't often get.
And I just think again, like the overall like vocal presence was so different, and like, you know, you're right, obviously the equipment and, you know, the budget was different as well, but just hearing them like new and reimagined, I can imagine that has to be such a daunting task to go into.
Definitely, it was daunting, but it was cool to sort of relive those songs again, and I'm happy that we did it, and I'm happy that we were able to give the album also the original artwork that we had wanted for it. That really cool, sort of like iconic ocean-themed photographic style album layout that we intended to have originally was finally realized. So that was awesome.
Yeah, every time I hear Red Sky Warning, even before it was re-recorded, that's kind of the image I got in mind, where it's like, you know, thunder and lightning on the ocean, you know, so super cool.
Hell yeah.
So now another question that I definitely want to get to is Nightmare on the Ninth. It started out about 1.5 years ago, and it's grown to a point where it's become a staple, and you guys every month have the most cool, unique, and new merch designs. Did you know it would get to this point? Is it difficult every month coming up with new ideas?
Well, thank you. I'm really so ecstatic that people like and love that drop that we do every month. And I you know, I hoped that it would grow into something that people look forward to. That was the idea from the onset, but I had no idea it would be and become what it has become. Sort of this thing that everyone looks forward to every month in our fan base. And it's definitely a lot of hard work. It's a lot of deadlines that we have to realize that, hey, you can't really take a breath and just kind of breathe after the last drop, because before you know it, the ninth's going to roll around for the next month. So we got to come up with ideas and figure out what garments to choose. And again, it's a total team effort between our management company, Absolute Merch, who prints our merch, and the mastermind behind the great artwork, a guy named Mike Cortado, who basically designs almost everything that you see visually from Ice Nine Kills. It's just an incredible artist who really can realize my vision in such an eloquent way.
Mike really is incredible. I know everything he's done with A Day to Remember, Pierce the Veil, and of course you guys. It's always just incredible and fascinating. I love it.
Yeah, he's exceptional.
Mm-hmm. So now I got one more question for you. Kind of a broad question, but what do you believe is the most frustrating and the most rewarding part of being in the music industry for so long, and then finally, you know, making it to the point where you guys are, Ice Nine Kills is like a household name for metal in the metal community. You know, you guys have gotten to that point. You've had a long road, and what do you think was the most daunting and the most frustrating task about that, and also just the most exciting?
I think in any industry that's as competitive as the music business, there's going to be ups and downs, and going into it, you just have to sort of accept that. And in the very beginning, like most musicians starting out trying to make their band a business, you know, I was very naive as to how things worked and what record labels were looking for, and how to really get to that next level and how to market. And I wish someone had kind of, you know, told me a little bit more about how to do it. But, you know, sometimes failure is the best teacher. And I think the most difficult time for the band was when we started to see some success after years of grinding and years of touring, and tinkering with our sound and trying to figure out what works, we started to get some traction. But it had taken so long to get that traction that a lot of people in the music business had already written us off. You know, even when we were starting to sell records and even when we were drawing people, impressive numbers in markets that weren't our home base, people in the business were still like, oh, that band's, come on, they're not going anywhere. So being able to change that perception was the most difficult thing. And I think once we realized that perception, it was undeniable what we were doing. And once we realized that perception was changing, you know, that was a really cool feeling. And we did it on our own terms. And I'm just really proud of the fact that we were able to accomplish that.
Yeah, you're right. And especially like in the music industry, you know, I think Kevin from This Wildlife says that you get a lot of like really no's because no one wants to be the guy to tell Adele, you know, no, I don't want you on my label or whatever. So you never really find out the correct way to do it. You're right. It's just trial and error. No one really helps guide you.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much again for talking with me today. I really appreciate it. Undead and Unplugged, available on all streaming services. And furthermore, we are so excited here at WSOU to hear what you guys have in store, what you guys are writing, and what is next for the new chapter of Iceland Kills.
Thank you so much. It was a fun interview.
Thank you.